Comments. This is an opportunity to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. In fairness to others, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Will the clerk please call the first person?
Hello. I'm Suzanne, and thank you for having me here today.
Could you please state your full name and
Suzanne
address,
Tang.
please?
Yes, 7410 Northeast.
And the last name?
Tang.
Tang. Okay.
Yeah.
Suzanne Tang.
Tang, yeah. 7410 Northeast 163rd Street. And it's Kenmore.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here because I would like to ask for consideration to have goats changed from the classification of livestock to pets, and that happened in Seattle recently. And I took a class from the woman who helped get the laws changed, and it's been going really well for Seattle. I think it would be a great opportunity. San Francisco and Portland also, apparently that's they allow goats. And I just think it would be great. I have some talking points. They don't need a ton of space. They have, the woman that wrote this book, she keeps her goats in a 400 square foot area, and that's plenty. They haven't caused any problems. And they classify the goats as like a pet, the same as a dog or a cat. So in Seattle, you can have 2 goats and 1 dog, so a maximum of 3 pets under 100 pounds. So like a Nigerian pygmy dwarf goat, which is a smaller breed, or an African pygmy goat. That would be under 100 pounds. They don't smell. There's some stipulations, like they have to be neutered, but the female goats and the neutered male goats don't smell. You can use their waste for composting. I just think it'd be a great opportunity. They're great. I got my son behind me, and he also went to the class, and it went really well. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Deborah Srebnick.
Hi, Deborah Srebnick, 18521 63rd Avenue Northeast in Kenmore. I'm here to express my enthusiasm for the Walkways and Waterways bond measure. I'm thrilled that we're going forward with that. It's been a long time coming. A lot of people in Kenmore have wanted something like this, as you know, for ever since incorporation and even before that. So very excited about that. And I think this bond measure really gets to the heart of what people want. I couldn't quite tell, but I'm hoping it includes some of the Phase 2, what we used to call Phase 2 improvements at Log Boom, to the area to the east of the pier on the waterfront. And I also just want to take this opportunity to underscore that when we make these improvements, and even for the improvements that we've already made, that we need to, and I know it's not part of the bond measure, but we need to think about the operations piece, the maintenance piece, and I've talked about this before. And I just want to give one example, and that is at Log Boom, the beach area, we have about half of the beach area that we did even 2 and 3 years ago, and that's because of the encroachment of invasives. We have permits to pull those back. The work hasn't been done. So I love to see these improvements, and I just hope we can also invest in the maintenance side of it. And again, want to thank you for doing this. Thank you for putting it on a faster time frame than we originally heard. And let us know, let KWAC know, let individuals know if there are things that we can do to help spread the word and support this measure.
Doug Ritchie. Good evening, and thank you for having me. My name is Doug Ritchie. I live at 10510 320th Avenue Northeast in Carnation, Washington. And I had to write it down because I recently moved there to help take care of my aging parents, and I couldn't remember the address. But in my role as head coach of the Kenmore Canoe and Kayak team, I spend about 30 hours a week at 7353 Northeast 175th Street in Kenmore, which is Squires Landing Public Park, which about 2 years ago the city began the process of acquiring the property and turning it into a park. And frankly, there's been great success in the canoe and kayak program that was born out of the existence of that park and the dragon boat team that is there. We now have a rowing program that's happening, and I really believe that this parks bond measure will help improve the city of Kenmore and the quality of life for the residents who live here. Today I was looking at some information about the top cities in America and cities that are deemed the best cities to live in. And one of the main things that they have is public parks for all of the residents to utilize. Seattle, the city of Seattle, was ranked 50th out of the top 100 cities in the United States, which is good, but I would have thought that the city of Seattle would have scored much higher than that. One of the reasons that they don't is that though they have a few really nice jewels in the crown, so to speak, Green Lake, the park at Green Lake being one of them, they don't have a lot of parks that are available for people to use. The Kenmore Canoe and Kayak team was at Green Lake over the weekend for a big racing regatta that took place. There were 185 competitors from as far south as San Diego, and there were 3 teams that came down from Canada, and our team had 8 competitors there, which I'm very proud of for our first year to have that many kids. We had 3 masters there as well, but we did very well for our first year. We have also been able to work with Archbishop Murphy High School to get them to recognize the canoe and kayak program for PE credits for their students, and you'd be surprised how many kids live in the Kenmore area who go to school at Archbishop Murphy High School. So it's another way for our community to become connected with the water and connected with the environment, and it improves the quality of life and the economy for the local area. So I want to express my support for your efforts for the bond measure, and as Deborah Shrebnick said, please let us know what we can do to help promote it this fall. Thank you very much.
There's no one else signed up.
Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? Is there anyone else wishing to be heard? Okay, moving along. The next item of business is a presentation. Leslie Harris and Sarah Sandquist.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and council members. Thank you for having us this evening. It is with great enthusiasm I get to introduce Sarah Sandquist tonight. She joined us, she's starting her 4th week here at the city as our new volunteer and event supervisor. She's done a wonderful job just jumping right in. We're very grateful that Cindy, our predecessor, she left great notes and has allowed her to really just get really started on that, meeting with community members. Another piece of her position, a significant piece, is going to be the town green programming. So we'll get that underway shortly. But Sarah's going to introduce herself and talk a little bit about what she's been working on coming up this summer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to give you a little background of who I am, where I came from, and I am originally from Chicago. My husband and I moved here in 2010, and we currently live in Seattle. We have a 7-month-old son, and most recently I've worked for the City of Redmond. I was the fitness coordinator for them. I programmed adult and youth fitness activities, 5K runs, and special events. And I'm thrilled to be here. As Leslie said, I'm starting my 4th week, so we're getting close to that first month. And What I've seen so far is a really incredible community of people who are invested in where they live and want to make it a better place. I've been contacted by so many people already looking to volunteer and to give back and to get involved. So that's been really great, and I will definitely put them to work. I can understand why Rob uses the volunteer hours graph as one of his things to highlight in meetings of how the volunteer hours have just skyrocketed, because it seems like Cindy has built a really great program, and I hope to continue to build that. I'm really looking forward to our summer special events. Been working on planning those. We have our 4th of July fireworks on the water. What a better place to view them. And we have programming for the kids ahead of time from 8 to 10, and food trucks at Log Boom. Then we also have our summer concert series. Our lineup is booked. We have a great lineup of six nights of shows at St. Edward State Park. Those kick off on July 7th. And then in August, we have our Kenmore Play Day. And we recently had our first committee meeting to plan that great event. We brainstormed new activities, and we're hoping to bring some more opportunities for kids to play to that event. I've also been busy meeting and greeting people around the community, the volunteers that I've spoken about, as well as some of our sponsors and our other community partners. So it's been really fun to get to know people who are really involved with the community. And then we've been promoting our first cleanup event at Log Boom Park on the 25th of June, and we are doing a dual cleanup of the shore area as well as removal of invasive weeds over by the dock. So it's been busy, and I don't think it's going to slow down, but that's okay. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Well, welcome to Kenmore. It's a great city to be associated with, a great group of individuals working with you. And so, welcome. We're glad to have you. Thanks. I've got 2 sets of notes to work from here, and I neglected to thank those that spoke, citizens that spoke to us. Suzanne, thank you so much for sharing your comments with us, and Deborah and Doug have left, but thank them. Next item of business is the consent agenda. All in favor of approving the consent agenda as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda is approved as submitted. Next item is a public hearing to receive public testimony regarding ordinance number 16-0421, amendments to the city marijuana regulations. Debbie Bent, Lori Anderson.
Thank you, council members. So before you officially open the public hearing, I will ask Laurie to kind of go over the background to this topic. As if you remember, we were before you in April, where you gave us direction to bring back an ordinance. So that's all I have to say, and I'll now turn it over to Laurie. Thank you, Laurie.
Good evening. So tonight's public hearing addresses 2 basic topics related to marijuana. One is medical marijuana cooperatives, and the second one is marijuana researchers. So the recommended ordinance would ban medical marijuana cooperatives in Kenmore, but would allow researchers as a new type of marijuana business. Last year, the state legislation revised the standards for collective gardens, now called cooperatives, for medical marijuana, and this legislation will take effect on July 1st, which is the reason for bringing this ordinance forward tonight. Cooperatives would be established by 4 designated providers or patients. They would have to be registered with the state, and they could grow a maximum of 60 plants. Members must provide non-monetary resources and labor to the cooperative, and records must be kept from seed to sale of the marijuana. Although the cooperatives cannot be located within 1 mile of a retailer or within the required buffer zones from sensitive land uses that are established both by the state and the city, they must be located in the domicile, that's the state word, of one of the members, making the city's residential neighborhoods prime potential locations. The state rules specifically say that the city can prohibit cooperatives, and staff, including Police Chief Souther, recommend against allowing cooperatives in Kenmore, as the city already has a marijuana retailer, Theorem, on SR 522 that has a medical marijuana endorsement. That endorsement allows them to sell medical marijuana without sales taxes to patients or their providers. 2, under state law, patients may grow their own marijuana in their housing units, and it can be either 4, 6, or 15 plants, depending on factors outlined in the state statute. It has to do with whether they're registered or whether their doctor tells them they need more marijuana, for example, than from 6 plants. The growing, however, may not be readily seen by normal unaided vision or readily smelled from a public place or the private property of another housing unit. So with the retailer and the opportunity to grow medical marijuana by patients and providers, staff recommends this proposed ban, which would prohibit collective garden or collective grow operations. The second issue has to do with a new entity, a marijuana researcher, which is a person licensed by the Liquor and Cannabis Board to produce, process, and possess marijuana for the purposes of conducting research on marijuana and marijuana-derived drug products. This includes both research on the substance, but also research on use. And I just went back and looked at the state statute, and it does talk about clinical trials and that kind of thing. So a description of the research must be submitted for review to the Liquor and Cannabis Board, and staff recommends adding marijuana researcher to the list of marijuana businesses. It would be subject to the same standards as the other marijuana businesses in the city. These existing standards very tightly restrict where a marijuana researcher could locate. It's the same restrictions that would apply to a retailer or a processor. At the council's request at the last meeting, when we talked about this, staff contacted Bastyr University to ask them about their interest in becoming a marijuana researcher. Bastyr presently conducts survey research, so they do it by survey, but they certainly don't do any studies involving use. They say that they have no near-term plans to conduct that kind of research, but they would potentially like to retain that opportunity for the future. Because the existing standards would have to be reviewed and there may need to be buffer adjustments, it would have to be crafted in a way that might allow it at Bastyr but not in other locations. Staff is recommending that you move ahead with the ordinance tonight out of concern for the July 1st deadline, but that consideration of amendments to allow a researcher potentially at Bastyr could be added to the docket for an upcoming year. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council? Councilmember Herbig?
I was just curious, if collective gardens were allowed, do they have to follow the same rules as home grow does around smell and not being able to be seen from public?
It doesn't, I don't think those exact words appear in the statute, but they have to be, they are regulated by the state, and the state has a series of rules. I can pull up the statute and see if I can find something.
I'm just curious if that sort of thing applies to them also.
Yeah.
Councilmember Smith?
Hi, Lori. I have a question regarding it says the medical endorsement that the retailer currently has.
Right.
Does a collective offer or do anything differently than what that retailer would be able to do?
It's possible that a cooperative could grow. A retailer sells whatever particular strains they're interested in, and a cooperative might, for example, be able to grow a strain perhaps that a retailer wouldn't carry. That's the one thing I can think of.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Sperry?
Thank you. Thank you for your continuing up to date on this ever-changing issue. One question I did have on attachment A, we talk about the separation between marijuana businesses, and there's an exception that you've highlighted that the marijuana researcher shall not have this particular separation requirement. And so it looks like you alluded, like you said in your presentation, that a researcher would have to, not be by a school, all that kind of
Right,
stuff.
correct.
But it sounds like it can be next to another marijuana business. You wouldn't have that 1,000-foot or whatever we have.
Correct.
Okay.
That would be correct, the way it is written. And as you recall, we put the 1,000-foot separation from businesses to avoid a cluster of retail locations, for example, or a cluster of producers or processors. A researcher, given the nature of that business, didn't seem to have the same potential adverse impacts, which is why that was eliminated for them.
Thank you for that clarification.
Councilmember Curtis.
So I don't quite understand why Bastyr is being called out specifically. So we're allowing research. Why would Bastyr need a special item to be on the docket? Is it because of their location?
It is. It's because the current rules say that marijuana businesses can only be in certain zones, regional business, urban corridor, downtown waterfront. And then there are these separation requirements that apply to businesses, and those can be reduced now, but the way the current code reads, it's 1,000 feet from those businesses. And so, for example, in St. Edward State Park, there's a playground, and so there are a number of pieces of the rules that would have to be manipulated to allow the use at Bastyr. I had contacted Bastyr, and by the time they got back to me, we were right at time to submit the agenda bill. There just was not time to go through all the permutations that would need to be looked at to adjust the regulations to allow it there. And the reason Bastyr was contacted specifically was that was a city council request to contact them and see if they had an interest.
And then I just have a comment on the Life Sciences Discovery Fund. So one of the pain and addiction doctors at Evergreen actually applied to them for a grant to do some things with prescribing of other controlled substances. So I'm familiar with that group, and they're actually very, very thorough and difficult to get your projects passed. So.
Right. Well, there was an oddity of what had happened with the Life Sciences Discovery Fund and the marijuana regulation, in that there was some funding issue with the Life Sciences Discovery Fund. So some of their responsibilities are being transferred. So although the statute says that the Life Sciences Discovery Fund will review the research proposal, it now is going back to the Liquor and Cannabis Board. So that's just a piece of additional information.
Other questions? I wasn't quite clear on the distance a research facility would have to have from the retail business. Could they be one and the same?
If you could get a research, you could certainly do it in the same building without the separation requirement from another business. The other separation requirements, 1,000 feet from parks, playgrounds, et cetera, those are all in place, along with the 200 feet from residential zones. So the only change to the separation requirements has to do with location relative to another marijuana business.
Okay. So they don't have to be 1,000 feet apart?
No.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no more questions from the council, I now declare that the public hearing is open. Will the clerk please call the first person?
There's no one signed up.
Is there anyone who would like to, wishing to be heard on this matter? Is there anyone wishing to be heard on this matter? Oh. Okay, now I declare the public hearing closed. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions on the ordinance? Before we vote on the ordinance, any other questions from the council? No? Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the ordinance number 16-0421, amendments to the city's marijuana regulations?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Will the clerk please take the roll?
Sir, are we going to have discussion? We usually do discussion before we vote.
Now. I just asked if there was any more discussion.
Oh, I know you asked about questions. I didn't have any questions.
It wasn't after the motion. It was before the motion.
Right.
So,
No,
okay.
I understand. Usually,
Any discussion? on
yeah,
the
I just want to say briefly.
Order, yeah.
No, it's okay. I just want to say briefly that I appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think that we are sadly needlessly taking away patient rights by making co-ops illegal in the city. People point to retail stores like Theorem as a possible source for the medical needs for a lot of patients, but unfortunately, talking to medical patients, myself, those retail stores don't really have the profit motive to carry a lot of the strains that specific patients need. A lot of patients don't have the ability to grow in their own home because of space or because of other restrictions of where they're living. And this is going to make it needlessly harder for them to get the medicine they need, so I'm going to be voting no.
Anybody else wishing to comment on the motion? Okay. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
No.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
651.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Will the clerk please call Mayor Baker? He's on the East Coast and would like to join in with us on the telephone for the next item of discussion. Doesn't sound right.
This is David.
Yes, Mayor Baker.
Yes.
You're attending by speakerphone regarding item number 9, relating to the ordinance number 16-0422, voter-approved bond measure. Can you hear us, David?
Barely I can hear, but yes, go ahead.
Okay, can the council hear Mayor Baker? Okay, thank you. Can you hear us now, Mayor Baker?
I can hear you a little bit better, yes.
Okay, everybody get close to your microphone. So, okay. There we go. I'll turn the presentation over to staff. We're all lined up there in front of us. So
is there a motion on the table?
Not yet. We're just starting the discussion.
Somebody wanted to skip a step.
Your Honor, may I begin?
Please.
Okay.
Please do.
Yeah, my name is Rob Carlindsey, City Manager for the City of Kenmore, and thank you, Mayor Baker, for joining us by phone. I hope you're having a good time out there on the East Coast. It's a little late there.
Yeah, just been up for a long time, but yes.
Yeah, we appreciate you calling in. So this is the night we've all been waiting for. This is the Imagine Kenmore team here flanking me to my right and to my left. And as you know, the Imagine Kenmore initiative has been going on since late last summer. And we've just got so much good public input from that initiative, from the open houses and public meetings and online resources and the surveys. Just really great feedback from the community on what they would like to see in the form of pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements, as well as park improvements. And as you all know, through this process, we've kind of funneled it down to specific projects that we think that meet the priorities and desires of our citizens, and those projects are shown up here on this map. They're also in your packet. There's 5 proposed projects that we're proposing to bring forward in a ballot measure, and I'll go over those projects in a minute. But on May 23rd, the City Council adopted resolution number 16-280, directing the city manager to prepare a bond election ordinance to be brought forward for the City Council's consideration for tonight. And so the attached ordinance is the ordinance that you have, which is ordinance number 16-0422, is in keeping with this resolution and puts forward a $19.75 million voter-approved walkways and waterways bond measure on the November 8th, 2016 ballot to fund projects identified during the Imagine Kenmore process. The proposed projects that would be funded via this ballot measure, again, are shown on this map, as I mentioned earlier, and there's 5 in all. There's the 68th Avenue sidewalks that would go from approximately 182nd Street and head northward up to the almost to the city limit there, where 61st meets Locust, or 62nd Avenue meets Locust. And for the most part, we would have sidewalks on one side of the street, the west side of the street, and bike lanes on both sides. The second project is Juanita Drive sidewalks and bike lanes. And on this project, sidewalks would be on the east side of Juanita and bike lanes on both sides of the street from 170th, which is also known as Simons, heading south all the way to the southern city limits. In between these 2 projects, and you can see it on the map, you see the green and the red. The red signifies sidewalks that are already in place, and the green signifies the Sammamish River Bridge project, which includes or assumes new sidewalk approaches to the bridge from 170th. So if the Sammamish River Bridge project is constructed as planned, and these 2 walkways and waterways sidewalk projects are built and constructed as proposed, then we would have continuous sidewalks on Juanita Drive and 68th from city limit to city limit. Then there's 3 more projects, and these are all park-related projects. There's Log Boom Park, waterfront access improvements, Rhododendron Park access improvements as well, mainly consisting of a trail and boardwalk connecting the play field to the water. There's also some parking improvements near the water proposed. And then lastly is Squires Landing Trail, boardwalk and river access. So this would be a series of trails and waterfront access improvement, including new docks and facilities to support that. Also included would be a parking lot off of 175th Street there. So all in all those come to a grand total of about $19.75 million. We have about $500,000 in there for bond issuance costs. We had a lower number for bond issuance costs earlier, but in talking to our financial advisor and bond counsel, we have determined that we'd probably do 2 bond issuances. And because we'd be issuing 2 series of bonds, that drives our issuance costs up a little bit. And what I'd like to do now is go into some of the financials on that. Again, the bond size is approximately $19.75 million. We'd issue 2 sets of bonds, or 2 series of bonds, one in 2017 and one in approximately 2020. The exact amount of that is still, of each issuance is still to be determined. But based on that assumption, we're looking at about 23 years of debt service because they would each be 20-year bonds, one issued in 17 and one issued in 20. Again, the exact years of these bond issuances are to be determined, but for now we're assuming the years 2017 and 2020. We're estimating or assuming interest rates of between 3 and 4%. That would result in an annual debt service on the bond of about $1.2 million per year, and a levy rate impact of about 32 cents per thousand of assessed valuation. Again, that's just an estimate based on what we know and certain assumptions, including interest rates and when the bonds would be issued. Under these assumptions, a estimated monthly impact on a $400,000 homeowner would be about $10.67. Again, that's an estimate because it's based on certain assumptions that may change. Also, on a $500,000 homeowner, the monthly impact is estimated to be $13.33 per month. So we are proposing that the bond measure go forward and be put in front of the voters on November 8th, and as staff, we will providing factual information, including information on our website and information sheets. We'll also be willing to go and hold open houses or go to various community groups, homeowners associations, PTAs, whatever, to get the facts out about the Imagine Kenmore and the Walkways and Waterways bond measure. So we're putting together informational materials on that now. You know everybody here at the table, my coworkers, but we have a couple people in the audience I'd like to introduce you to you as well. One is Sarah Langton with Langton Spieth. She's a consultant that's been advising us on this project. And also Deanna Gregory is our bond counsel, so she's an attorney that's been helping us through this process. Not with us tonight is our financial advisor, Lindsay Sovday. Did I pronounce that right? With Piper Jaffrey, and you'll get a chance to meet her probably in the next few weeks. So, with that, are there any questions?
Councilmember Curtis?
So I have a couple of questions. One, when I do this is the estimated annual debt service on the bond, it says $1.2 million. To me, that seems like more than 3 to 4% of $19.7 million. Is something wrong with my math?
Well, you're paying off principal as well. So there's principal in there, not just interest.
Oh, okay. So that's the interest plus the, okay. For some reason, I got the impression that was the interest. I said it couldn't be that high. Okay. That one's easy. It seems like there would be 3 different time periods. And so the question is, would we be paying different amounts? So the first one, there'd be bond number 1. There'd be about 3 years we'd be paying a certain amount. Then we'd have a chunk where we're paying 2 bonds, and then at the end we'd be finishing off the second bond. So it seems like the amount we pay would be different in those 3 sections. Is that correct?
We could structure that way, and that's a decision you can make when we go to issue the bonds. But our assumptions show a pretty level payment from year 1 through year 2023, or 23, I mean. So the way we currently assume it to be structured, it's $1.2 million for all 23 years.
So what if something happens that the second one doesn't happen when we think it will? So the first piece assumes the second one is going to happen?
It does, but if it didn't, then we would be able to pay the bonds off that much sooner or restructure them to pay them off sooner.
Okay.
And Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I have a question on the annual maintenance cost on the parks. I think the number was totals 90,000. Is that just for labor, or does that include like a depreciation schedule of the work, the improvements at the parks? Or if you can give me an idea on what that 90,000, how that's arrived at in those individual parks.
Yeah, we had consultants take a look at that. Our landscape architect consultants were looking at the cost of maintenance. They did not depreciate assets, but they did have things like labor and materials and repairs and things like that.
Okay, thank you. And I'll probably have one other question later.
Councilmember Sperry?
So on the maintenance costs that were just mentioned, would any of that be paid out of this bond?
No.
Okay.
This is capital only.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council?
Well, I do have a question, one other, and it has less to do with the bond, but it has, if we approve this, I think it's really important that we're clear what our citizens can expect if they do not approve this. And so will we be, as a city, will we be issuing anything or any kind of a statement or a rundown of what we still, because we have ongoing projects that we can continue to do. Obviously, this is above and beyond what we would normally be doing. But will there be something the city will provide to the citizens so they'll at least understand what this means, both on the approval side and a non-approval?
So on the non-approval, you're suggesting that we have a statement saying what will happen if it doesn't pass?
Yeah, what I'm trying to do is set an expectation so that if somebody says, look, if this isn't approved, they're not going to be doing any sidewalks anywhere. I just want people to understand that doesn't mean business stops at the city if we don't approve this. And I just wanted to know if we're doing anything proactively to at least let people know that we do continue to work through our capital improvement plans.
Yeah, we do have an adopted 20-year sidewalk plan and 20-year transportation plan and adopted 6-year CIP and all those things, and we can definitely talk about those.
Okay, it's to try to avoid having people say things that aren't true. And that's why I'm trying to look ahead, and because obviously there will be significant discussions going forward over pro and con and what this means. And I just want to make sure that the facts are out there so people understand. I will be voting for this tonight, but I think it's important that people that don't want to support it understand what it is the city's still providing.
So, for example, I do not, based on my experience, believe 68th Avenue is going to be very grant competitive. So from my perspective, we likely, maybe some around the school, Kenmore Junior High, like we're building our Safe Routes to School sidewalk soon in the next couple of years, but the rest of 68th I do not think would be grant competitive, and so I don't expect to see much more sidewalk on 68th. So that's what you're alluding to.
That's exactly what I'm getting to. It's at least to have a reference of comparison so people, it'll help them in their decision making, because it's easy just to look at this and say, wow, this is a lot of really cool stuff, but it's also reasonable that from a family budget position that they at least know if they're going to vote no, then it's reasonable to expect you won't have sidewalks going all the way to the north end to the junior high for quite a while. And that, for some people, that may be a very fine trade-off. I just would like as much accurate information for people to make an informed decision.
Yeah, I think another example is there was a city that went through a bond measure, and the message intentionally or unintentionally got out that if they didn't pass the bond measure, they would eventually build all that stuff anyway, but just would take longer. And I think one thought was that the citizens said, well, okay, we'll just vote no, and it'll get built a few years later than the bond measure would have. And I doubt that, and I'm pretty sure that's not the case here. I don't see, without this bond measure, I don't see any of these projects getting built anytime soon.
And that's sort of what I assumed, especially also you talked about 68th. I kind of looked at it from the sidewalk end and knowing what those estimates were 10 years ago on the Juanita project, that I realized that it dwarfs what our annual budget is practically. And so it's important that that information is available.
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, Mayor Baker?
Yes. If it's appropriate, I'd like to move for approval of ordinance number 16-0422.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded.
And I'm in no means cutting off discussion. I mean, continue.
Yeah. Is there any discussion of the motion? Councilmember Sperry.
I'll speak in favor of the motion. This is the the end of one process and the beginning of another. How's that sound?
Culmination.
Can't say the words here. What I like about this is I wasn't sure where we were going to land, but what I look at the map, and all of a sudden, all these things that citizens have asked for years, there's a potential that this could really happen. And the time frame, even though after being on the city council for a decade, time is not like how we think of time, but by passing this, if the citizens decide to pass this, this would really accelerate access to the water. I've joked for years, we're Kenmore by the lake. I've been trying to get to the lake. So this would give people a lot more opportunities to get to the lake. And plus it addresses one of our main safety issues, which is sidewalks on the arterials. So I am in favor of this ordinance.
Councilmember Herbig.
Thank you. I'll be voting in favor of the motion today. While this isn't everything I had hoped and dreamed when we first started the discussion around this, this is a huge step in the right direction for Kenmore. I'm very excited that after finishing our east-west kind of spine throughout the city, we'll hopefully now be able to work on our northwest spine on 68th and Juanita and get that finished. And the parks improvements are very exciting. So I want to thank staff for all the work they put into this, because I know this was not an easy lift for you guys. And I'm excited to move forward with this. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll compliment the staff as well. A lot of work has gone into this with the Imagine Kenmore, a lot of research, a lot of surveys, all very well done and good preparatory work for it. If there are no other questions of our staff representatives here, we're going to call for a vote. Clerk, would you please take the roll?
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Not often I get a chance to make a motion, and when it's a definite yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
7-0.
Okay, thank you. David,
Thank you.
Time
Thank
to go
you
to
all
bed.
very
Good
much.
night.
I know there's
It's
a lot
late
of
back
work
there.
gone into this, and thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Staff report.
Good night.
You cut?
Yeah, I'll just stay up here if that's okay, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Just a couple quick things. You all know by now, but I thought I would just mention it on the public record that the city has received the Governor's Smart Communities Award for Smart Partnerships. And we got that award because of our Kenmore Village project and our partnership with Main Street Property Group. And the partnership and the public-private investment and all the public amenities and features that go with it really impressed the evaluators for that award, and so we're really pleased that we received that award. And Main Street is very ecstatic about it as well. And We're tentatively looking at having that award officially presented to the city at the July 11th City Council meeting, so stay tuned on that. Lastly, at the beginning of the meeting during public comment, a citizen made a request to change our code pertaining to goats. My question to you is, how would you like to proceed on that? You may recall a few weeks ago that you got a request about changing the code regarding to chickens. And at that point, you suggested that we wait till the January 2017 council retreat where you kind of tell us what docket items you would like to move forward with. So we could do that, or you could direct us to take a look at it sooner. It's up to you. Or not look at it at all. That's another option.
Councilmember Herbie?
Mr. City Manager, I was wondering, where are we with miniature pigs?
Miniature pigs. Okay. Like, where did that come from?
That's another pet.
Yeah, I know. Is that the same as potbelly pigs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are.
There are a lot of livestock that could be considered pets.
Well,
Go ahead, Councilmember.
I'd just say that it makes sense. If we're going to be talking chickens, we might as well talk goats, and if we want to talk pigs as well. But if we're going to bring the farm to the discussion, we might as well cover it all. So I would rather do it at the retreat or all at once rather than piecemeal it.
Okay, Councilmember Curtis?
That's my inclination too.
I agree. I'd like to wait till January. I have a feeling it'll open up a few other questions and doors and kind of catch that all in one bucket.
Okay. Councilmember Sperry?
Well, just the two things here. The first one was the email that we got from the citizen. I assume it's the same person who spoke tonight.
No, it's not. It's a different person.
Is it a different person?
Oh, really? I thought it was the same.
It was the same one.
Well, there was one today. Well, maybe we didn't get it at the council. There
Oh.
was one today. Their goat got out of their backyard, and that was somebody else.
Oh, okay. The one I'm talking about was the one over the weekend that I CC'd you all on.
Okay.
Boy, does that show how complicated it gets pretty quick. I hadn't really thought about it. Well, there was something about the square footage of the lot size, and that seemed, like that could be easy, but then again, it may be best just to wait and look at the whole thing together. So, but the lot size, if it's just simple as that seemed like that might be something we could look at sooner rather than reclassifying all the animals as different things. So, I actually used to have goats growing up, and I did.
I think that the issue there was also about whether it's neutered or not and how many pounds it is. So I think it is more than just lot size, and so that's why it's probably best to delay it.
Councilmember Curtis?
As I read through that, it made me think, what about the dogs that are over 100 pounds? Do they fit in the livestock or in the pets? So I think there's a lot of issues that we need to think through very carefully.
How about pet snakes, boa constrictors, and so on? Some of those are pretty heavy. Can you get in touch with the individual? And
we'll get back to her and let her know you're going to discuss it in January.
Okay. Thank you.
That's
Anything
all I have.
else from staff?
That's it.
Okay. Council member comments and initiatives. We'll start down at the end with Councilmember Smith.
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry. Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Herbie.
Nothing to add.
Danuski.
I wanted to welcome Sarah. Had a good play day meeting with her. And then we also heard from Deb on park cleanup. Maybe could include pulling out some of the weeds from the rocky beachish area. If you're coordinating that, maybe that's something we can do that day.
Yeah. Okay. We had a lively discussion at ETP last Friday. Sound Transit presented to us last month. It was Peter Rogoff, who's the new CEO of Sound Transit, started 5 months ago, I guess. We asked him to talk to us in May, and there were some, we were running short of time, and there were some questions that were a little pointed to him. He handled them very well. He's got a lot of experience in transportation, but it was obvious that ETP wanted to discuss the ST3 proposal and Sound Transit's mission more fully, and so we decided to make it a major portion of the agenda this last Friday. And then came the difficulty of the leadership in ETP setting the format for that discussion so that we could keep the discussion civil, because there's some very definite differences of opinion as to whether the proposal, the ST3 proposal, is something that they should favor or not, and whether ETP should take a stand on it, and so on. Well, after a lot of emails back and forth with King County Council member Balducci and a phone call from Peter Rogoff from Sound Transit, we set the ground rules that no personal attacks, no inflammatory comments. Let's keep this discussion civil. We're all adults. And the discussion really went quite well, I think. Don't you, Chris, when you were there? A lot of good questions were asked. One of them, can't remember who it was from, but they suggested having on the website a calculator where one could punch in the value of your cars, the value of your home, and the assessed value of the home, and maybe approximately what you spend that's taxable with sales tax. And this calculator then could figure out what your increase in tax would be if this passes. They thought that was a good idea, and I think a lot of us, a lot of the cities thought it might be a good idea. It's pretty simple when you're just talking about a property tax increase. You just so much per thousand, and what's your assessed valuation is pretty easy to figure it out. But it's a pretty simple thing to put on the website too, if you're publicizing the bond issue, as we are here. So I thought it was kind of interesting. I thought I'd share that with all of you. If there are no other comments from the council, this meeting is now adjourned. We don't have an executive session, do we? Okay, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Thanks, Rob.
Yes.